Network Africa this week, it's about winning a health war, fighting for the rights of the oppressed, and getting justice for those without voices. First up, the race to stop the spread of the Ebola virus disease is still on, and nothing is being left to chance.
You know, teachers, they are really trusted members of their communities. That is why we want to use them. They are especially fitted to deliver these really important messages to the public.
Then the UN advises South Sudanese leaders to take a strong stand against human rights abusers and let them know that impunity will not be tolerated.
The ensuing violence has ignited a wave of grievous human rights violations and abuses for which victims and their families cry for justice.
Also today, an abused toddler gets justice. And on a lighter note, we celebrate African beauty.
Being an example for the rest of the world that unity is possible. So I am proudly South African as I sit here.
Hello and welcome to Network Africa with me, Cynthia Are. Now, as 2014 slowly but surely comes to an end, the race to end the spread of the Ebola virus is on the rise. Both African and Western individuals and organizations are doing what they can to bring the Ebola virus to its knees. For instance, despite the fact that a new serum supply made from the blood of survivors has reached Liberia to treat affected cases there, locals in the country are still doing their part in educating the residents about Ebola prevention measures.
Liberian teachers have received training on awareness of the deadly virus Ebola to help fight the plaguing disease in the country. Liberia's Ministries of Health and Education have been working with the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund in training Liberian teachers on Ebola awareness. So far, less than half of the country's 11,000 teachers have received the vital training that aims at improving the awareness of Ebola among the more than 3.4 million people. Information sharing is believed to be an essential ingredient in the fight against Ebola.
Teachers indeed went back into their school community to give preventive lessons and messages how to prevent yourself on Ebola and to be safe.
The teachers are fulfilling an enormously important task in the country by sharing information with their communities to keep Ebola rates down.
You know, teachers, they are really trusted members of their communities. That is why we want to use them. They are especially fitted to deliver these really important messages to the public.
We as teachers, we know how to talk to our students, and we know how to encourage our parents to send their children to school. So when we are involved in a fighting war, the war that we are fighting, we'll be able to easily talk to them, they'll be able to listen to us.
But it is not only about giving back to the communities, but also about deepening human feeling.
Everyone who died in this country, in Liberia, or even a foreigner, it hurt me because the death rate is counted on Liberia. So like we were feeling very, very bad. So after we got involved, after we're eager in the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, and UNICEF called us up to come in.
The international community is still working hard to help hard-hit countries, as neglect could mean further spread into the West. U.S. President Barack Obama on Friday, December 12th, hailed a budget compromise that many of his fellow Democrats opposed, saying it is a product of both sides working together.
This bill also contains the necessary funding to continue to make progress on our fight against Ebola, both at home and abroad. I know that after a frenzy of news reports for several weeks, Ebola has faded from the headlines. On the other hand, although we have not seen an additional case here in the United States, I have always said that we have to make sure we're prepared here at home, and we will not have defeated this disease until we have defeated it where it is most prevalent, and that is in West Africa.
Obama said the $1.01 trillion legislation that passed the House of Representatives and appeared headed towards approval by the Senate contains funds necessary for the fight against Ebola.
We've got to stay on this. This is not a problem that is going to go away anytime soon. And until we have snuffed out the last case of Ebola in West Africa, there is always the prospect and, in fact, likelihood that it spreads and could end up coming back to the United States.
Other Western countries like the UK and Canada are testing different kinds of vaccine in controlled clinical trials. The aim is to have 20,000 doses that could be used in specific countries like Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone by early next year.
Now, away from health, despite ongoing peace talks between Sudan's government and the rebel Sudan's People's Liberation Movement North, or SPLMN, daily aerial attacks continue in South Kordofan provinces, and that's in the Nuba Mountains. Adam Bales was there and reports that government forces are targeting civilian areas rather than military positions with their daily bombardments.
Smoke rises over Nuba Mountains. Another day, another aerial attack. In this 3-year-old conflict in Sudan's South Kordofan and Blue Nile states, people here live in constant fear of such attacks. 8 bombs fell here this morning, and every day more planes come. In the village of Tonguli, just 4 kilometres from Sudan's armed forces front line, many families hide in caves, the only relatively safe place left. Mahana Bashir is the commissioner for Coalib County.
Antelope is coming. They want to bomb.
The children are the first to run to the caves.
Bombing.
The village elder explains, every day's bombing is the same.
7 days. From Sunday to Sunday. Monday, about 12.
Sudan's military has been accused of indiscriminately bombing civilian markets and villages in rebel areas. Commissioner Bashir says about 9,000 people are in direct danger in Coalib County alone.
3 years of bombing, day and night. Give you the feeling you are not belonging to this country. Give to any person who are not belong to this country. Because a country that can fight their own people, denying food for their own people, denying healthy water for their own people, denying medical care for their own people. This country we cannot belong to.
Media reports estimate more than 2,000 bombs have been dropped in the Nuba Mountains since 2012, though the government in Khartoum denies all allegations. Just a few days ago, this small farm was hit by crude bombs dropped from high-flying Antonov cargo planes. Attacks are wildly inaccurate, but devastating. Bashir says civilians are being targeted.
An air attack inside the village. No any military target or military station. Just they are targeting civilians. And you see, inside the village.
South Kordofan's deputy governor, Suleiman Jabon, says the world is turning a blind eye.
Even I wonder and surprising me from the silence of the international world, media and international bodies, they are just keeping silent. I don't know how they value the human being, the value of the human being. That's a silent.
Several 100,000 people have fled the region. Many who stay are simply tired of moving. Rashida Kalari lives permanently in the caves. After fleeing heavy fighting last year, she was left with nothing.
The situation is very bad. I have 4 young children. They cannot walk any distance, so I decided to remain here to save my children from the bombings.
After 3 years of bombardment, there is no sign of change. People here are trapped, frustrated and desolate. Kuku Jaz Kua, a rebel brigadier general, says he is tired of talking to journalists and then waiting for a response from the outside world which never comes.
There are many journalists coming from different countries to Nuba to see the situation. They witness the fighting and write about the bombings, and still, there's no action from the international community. The Sudan government is committing atrocities against children and old people. If it was soldiers that were killed, it would be better. But the Antonov targets the young kids and elders. That's why this makes me so sad.
As night falls, children gather to play football in the brief moments of peace before dark. For now, many here are trapped, living on the front line. Adam Bales for VOA News, Koalib, Sudan.
Now, speaking of happenings in Sudan, South Sudan is also going through its share of difficulty, but not with folded arms. The Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General, or SRSG, for the world's newest country, in the person of Ellen Margaret Lodge, has advised that South Sudanese leaders should take a strong stand against human rights abusers and let them know that impunity will not be tolerated in the least.
Need and deserve peace, security.
Lodge was speaking on Wednesday, December the 10th in Juba at a ceremony to celebrate International Human Rights Day. She condemned the fact that South Sudanese were marking the 4th annual Human Rights Day since independence at a time of national crisis, yet rights had been at the heart of the struggle for the country's independence.
Sadly, South Sudanese have today witnessed a dramatic deterioration in the human rights situation since the political dispute is escalated into an armed conflict almost 1 year ago. The ensuing violence has ignited a wave of grievous human rights violations and abuses for which victims and their families cry for justice.
The SRSG also called for greater respect for women's rights, including their participation in nation building, referring to this year's theme, Human Rights 365. The event was attended by UN peacekeepers and other officials. Fighting erupted last December in South Sudan, which declared independence from Sudan in 2001 after months of political tension between President Salva Kiir and his sacked deputy and rival, Riek Machar. The civil war has killed more than 10,000 people in the world's newest state, reopened deep fault lines among ethnic groups, caused over 1 million people to flee, and driven the country of 11 million people closer to famine. His talks, brokered by African Regional Group, IGAD, have yet to reach a deal.
Leaders need to take a strong public stand against human rights violations and let their supporters know that impunity cannot be tolerated.
The UN envoy said perpetrators of human rights abuses had to be punished in order to ensure the credibility of a peace process in South Sudan.
We can and we must ensure that the cycle of violence is broken. Like everyone else, the South Sudanese people need and deserve peace, security, development, and a culture of human rights.
Meanwhile, the United Nations mission in South Sudan has destroyed an assortment of deadly weapons confiscated from internally displaced persons living in its protection of civilian sites in Juba amid broader efforts to diffuse tensions in the young country.
We hope that the destruction of all confiscated weapons and ammunition in the mission's custody will help foster an environment that is conducive to silencing the guns and the restoration of peace to the world's youngest nation state.
This is a historic day for us, and it comes just before the anniversary of the tragic events that happened last year in December. So this for me is a very, very satisfying day because we're actually doing something positive to improve the safety of the civilians and everyone in South Sudan.
In the meantime, diplomats said on Tuesday, December the 9th, that a push at the UN Security Council to impose sanctions on South Sudan's warring parties had reached an impasse due to a dispute over whether to include an arms embargo.